Hi, Shirley here, and today I'm going to post the full moon in Capricorn, kind of like an obligatory video to make. You can't be an astrologer if you don't do full moon charts, right? And when I looked at the chart, it was like, and I don't have the editing program here because I'm storage limited. I need free storage. But it looks like those triangles that have this 90-degree shape, and you kind of have the moon and Pluto conjuncting Pluto in Capricorn. Like you could hardly get darker than that, right? The moon in the Saturnian sign conjuncting Pluto, kind of at the end of the sign, at the end of the cycle, bringing those obligatory purges. It's kind of like you're almost there, just a couple of more things to purge, and you're almost there. And then, of course, opposing the sun in Cancer, and also opposing Mercury. And the minute I saw Mercury, I don't know if it's still going to be, I think it's still going to be out of bounds in Cancer, opposition in Pluto, and Mercury is ruling my 4th and 7th, and in my 2nd, I was like, ah! But then I looked at it, and you kind of look at the trines, where are the trines and the sextiles, and what do we have to mitigate this dark, heavyweight, emo, anxious, dramatic, lunar cycle? Uranus. Like literally, Uranus is going to trine the whole thing. Like very, very, well, you depend on the orb, because it's so strange. I mean, that's like a 10-degree orb that they put with the chart. It's not an actual mitigation, but the chart was looking so funny. It was like, what do you have to mitigate that with? Well, Uranus, because it's going to be sextiling the Sun and Mercury, and supposedly trining, the Moon and Pluto. Of course, I don't think that like a 10-degree orb is something we would consider as something that can mitigate Pluto. And anyway, any even harmonious aspect between these two is kind of like it's not really mitigation. But the rule still goes. Lean into that. So the Taurus Scorpio place in your chart is going to have sort of like the answer or the key to a certain sort of revolutionary approach, or taking some action or self-care action that is unconventional. So with Taurus, a Venusian sign, it can be, I believe it's still at the Mercury decan, but I'm not sure. So it can be a certain sort of verbal expression. You can do rap, actually. You can do, if you rap, then you can do rap, a rap battle. That can be a great way to kind of mitigate that effect. Something unconventional with the way you reach an agreement, the way you do Venusian things, or the way you do your Cancer house. So let's say for me, Cancer is the 5th house, and it's also the house of gambling, but it's also the house of leisure activities. So that could be some sort of nourishing myself in an unconventional way, or all the ideas that I don't think I can say say out loud. But that's Uranus. But if you look for the mitigation this time, it's going to be a purgatory kind of explosion. It can be that sense of rebellion. You go to rebel in something, and that is going to liberate you a bit, liberate your psyche. You can draw something that is like a sketch, or again a satire, or a painting, of the thoughts that you have in your mind. You can make something funny, something humoristic from your emotions and your thoughts. Make a comedy, make a satire of the thoughts and the worries you have in your brain. That can very well be a way to mitigate this effect, because we have this Mercury thing. It's like, the Moon and Pluto are opposition in Mercury in Cancer, and I think that Mercury is going to be, no, it's not. But the Saturn is, I believe, still in the Mercury. The Uranus, I believe, still in the Mercury decan of Taurus. So, using your wit as a way to release and rebel and kind of like release your psyche, because there's going to be a lot of heaviness and a lot of deep emotions and a lot of deep energies. So a lot of anxieties combined with the emotional upheaval of your psyche. So to make a comedy of what's going in your head, if you're extremely in pain or extremely nervous or extremely worried, kind of make a comedy of what's going on, and you can paint that, you can film that, you can sing that, or write a vlog or a sketch or a satire just around those inner worries in your head, and it will probably be tied to the world at large. It will probably be tied to the structure of things, because it's Capricorn, so it will probably have something to do with the fundamental structure of something. But let's say you have Capricorn, not in your 10th or 11th, but you have it, let's say, in your 7th. So you can take a look at the way that you've been doing commitments, and you can just laugh at, certain types of commitment styles. Doesn't have to be monogamy. It can be all kinds of commitment styles. You can make a joke of the thoughts that are running through your mind about how this structure causes these fears or confinements or power imbalance, and that act of wits is going to bring about an insight. So instead of being with your emotions, which I think is not going to be quite feasible, because Moon in Capricorn, which is a very worried sign, practical but extremely worried, next to Pluto, which is the very excavating sign. So you're going to feel the pain of the underdog in the structure. Perhaps even if you are the Pluto character, and that can lead to some sort of happy transformation. But you're going to feel deeply that sense of doom and gloom. And then with your Mercury ruling your, the mind faculties out of bound in Cancer, and if I'm not mistaken, the Moon is out of bounds as well. So it's like, don't expect to just be with that. And with another outie, with Uranus sextiling the Moon, it's too much energy to just be with it. Don't expect a sort of stoic meditation to do the job for you. Move around, dance, laugh about your emotions. It's going to be a little bit of, perhaps feel like a little bit of a dissociation, but it's not necessarily a chronic dissociation or a pathological state, but something that allows you to take space, Uranus, to take a space from the subject matter and to look at it intellectually and with wit, Mercury, and to have that sort of cathartic letting go of things, letting go of the humor. And from that vantage point, after the Moon is done its cycle, and it's going to move around from that pivotal place, from that vantage point, you're going to have an insight as to the new path. So it can be something, it can be a joke that becomes an initiation. If I think, like a pivotal casual statement or a joke that becomes something that you actually practically do. So try to think of a situation that started from a joke. I can think about the first movie I made together with a director that actually went to festivals, and there was like an urban legend about a person that sleeps with dead bodies, and we're just sitting at the cafe, and I had like the finish line that that his wife is suicidal and he sleeps with her, and then we went out and we made the movie, and it came out from like a joke, an urban legend, and then we decided to make it like a serious movie with all the deep psychological stuff, but also the light and funny stuff, because we just thought it's going to be really funny if one of the bodies he ends up sleeping with would be his dead wife, and kind of lightly ruminated about it over a cup of coffee at 2 decades ago, and that became an award-winning film. That was one of the greatest achievements that I had in my filmmaking era. So that can be a sort of a start of a line of revolution. Or when I was in the pre-Me Too case, and I did not know about the Me Too, I was writing about certain experiences I had on social media, and people wanted me to shut up about it, and I was watching a satire with my friend, and I said, oh my God, I can write it as a satire. And then, I wrote Sugar-Free Lemonade, which was a satire about the whole structure, Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn, that led to me dealing with what I dealt with as, a single person. Whenever you have an outer planet, it's not just looking at your own internal structure, saying, oh, I've been through an intense experience, a trauma, an abuse, feeling disempowered, and kind of look at in your own internal psychology to solve things. Pluto is an outer planet. That's why therapy, one-on-one therapy with Pluto can get so abusive and not really solve anything, because you're just getting into another power imbalance situation, unless it's accompanied by a larger structure, like a larger action to change something related to that outer planet. It could be any outer planet, Neptune, Pluto, Uranus, sometimes even Saturn. So the moon there next to Pluto is going to get informed about the deep effect of how are people emotionally affected. And I'm just saying that intellectually, and I'm like, can I skip like to the moon in Aqua or something? It's like, how are people being emotionally affected? And again, you much rather delve that with a certain sort of intellectual appraisal, just intellectually understand that needs to be taken care of, and that is what these people experience, rather than going through the whole experience. Not all of us are going to have a choice relative to that matter, but it's a sort of a deeper understanding of what needs to change, what is the impact of the things being as they are. And if you do laugh about your emotions, if you make a little bit of a comedy around that, the kind of inner hyoka within you is going to strike and is going to shine, and then you'll see that you're going to receive the solution of what you have to do now, what action needs to be taken, what needs to be done. And depending on your individual chart, you're going to see when can you take that action relative to that matter, because it's something that you're not the only one who is dealing with. It does relate to a deep psychological thing that you've been going through in the Capricorn phase of your life, but it's something that is beyond the self. You're not alone with this. There are many people going through that, and that is probably necessarily a matter of the structure that has to become more equitable, because when we go from Capricorn to Aquarius, we go from the confinement of hierarchy to the confinement of anarchy. And we need to understand that both are confining, but it's kind of understanding what needs to be to get more leverage within the hierarchy. And it's not it's not a refinement process, it's Pluto. So it's kind of like you've been peeling off layers. If we, for me, it's easy to go to the Me Too example or to the Arab Spring. Okay, we've been peeling off layers, and now we have the war in Ukraine. And we're like, oh, that the whole Syria thing was like a foreplay to what's going on in Ukraine, because in Ukraine you do have resources. You have the Ukrainian people producing the electricity for electric cars, and probably also electric jet planes, and providing that for China. So it was kind of like, oh, in Syria they were only testing the weapon because there is no natural resources in Syria, and we've been peeling off layers, and now it's the final decision. What are we going to do? What is the world going to do right now to tackle the issue of regenerative energies, solar energies, hydrogen energies, plant-based energies, in whichever way that works. So that is going to be, we can no longer rely. We already have certain technologies in existence that we perhaps have been postponing the refinement of, but we can no longer rely on solving matters the way we solve the way we handle things with oil prices. It's not just another peace agreement. It's going to be a very difficult peace agreement, but it's not just another peace agreement. And you can already see, me located right now in the state of Israel, you can already see how Israel is making connections with Saudi Arabia, attempting to, kind of wondering about should there be a peace agreement, because sometimes there's more leverage when there is peace but no peace agreement, and the Arab countries. And you can understand how, if the United States decide to make its whole deserts solar factories, and then transport it around the country and find a way to conserve the energy and kind of invest in that, like the King of Morocco did and survived the Arab Spring fantastically. He's like the best example of what perhaps should have been done, or maybe if what Assad could have done during his regime, that perhaps would have put Syria in a completely different place. But if it's kind of like, okay, nobody's going to rely all that much, maybe except Europe, on Saudi Arabia, Israel will not have a problem to kind of to go, people talking about flights to Riyadh. It's not going to be a problem anymore, and the whole face of the way we look is going to change. But also, it's not going to be a problem that we don't have electric cars if we have solar ones. And what does it mean about China? What does it mean? Meanwhile, the only company I've seen just really doing the work concerning solar powered cars that are meant for the common people is Lightyear One in Eindhoven, in the Netherlands. That's not anywhere near Ukraine or Russia or China. So those things are changing tremendously. And the people who are impacted by the things as they are the people who still have the car that relies on gas or electricity, by the way. The people who have been waiting for a year for a new car. The people who are going to suffer the rise of energy prices. The people who need to get to their jobs some way. And the people who eat bread, like celiac people, are less affected by the rise in wheat prices. They're affected by other rises in prices if they eat sugar, for example. But that's something that is going to be felt. With the moon, you feel that. You become aware of that. Your mind faculties that correlate with how you psychologically experience things are being triggered in a sign that's very doom and gloom, it's very practical, it's very cold cut, but not unemotive. Nobody is unemotive. It's just being exposed to a reality where certain things are in limited source. and there is lack of equity in resources. Because the whole pyramid, if you look at the more liberal economies, the whole concept is that if I'm going to open a business, then I'm going to be successful. I'm going to have employees that are going to be successful. If I'm going to get leverage of life, then it would be inconceivable for me that my employee will not have a jet plane to get to a meeting or to have a vacation or to flex out. Because to me, it's like, if I didn't have that, oh my gosh, like I would not be able to do what I do. So naturally, if I want to be, a good competitor, I want my employees to be strong and passionate. And then you kind of have this logical perception that, if the people at the frontier are making good wealth, it's going to reach the lower phases of the hierarchy. But that can only work with wealth that is of well-being. That can only work if the wealthy are also healthy. And as we know, if you take a look at the people higher up the pyramid, I can even say from my personal life, when I dedicated 2 decades of my life to learn screenwriting, and it both came about from being a bit more isolated in my upbringing and focusing on studies. And then when I was in my 20s and I had to date, I was like, I fell on a person that could be described as a narcissist, but I didn't even understand that. Although today I believe more in relationship dynamics diagnosis rather than personality disorders. But I couldn't understand that because I was like, I had no real experience with non-work communication. And so you get that with, so I was just a normal human being. Think about celebrities, think about CEOs, think about people who run great companies, think about even great politicians. They're not exposed to the commoners. And so it's very difficult to be healthy when you don't interact with the common people. You're disconnected. And then we know that in many ways, both in therapy, both in medicine, necessity is the mother of invention. So you would expect the rich to have better medication system. But that can only be true if they travel, if they go and see the world, if they see how in different cultures, different ailments are being diagnosed, and where do we take our most advanced medicine strategies and algorithms. Right now we're talking about alternatives to the evidence-based and science-based medicine. We're talking about deriving algorithms that can model TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, for diagnosis. Because the TCM diagnosis criteria is based on a holistic perspective and not a divide and conquer perspective that does not work so much with the ontological unit as the human body or the human body mind or the patient. So it's a bit difficult to conclude anything about the human being in the way that we would conclude about photons and light waves. Even that was very difficult, but that had to be done with great, looking into the micro aspect. And here, the macro aspect, things are not going to act the same as the micro. And I know some of you are like, well, quantum tells us that. Well, okay, fine. I did not do enough research to be able to model, to equate quantum models, which are not very advanced, like since what they were in the 60s, and medical models. That's work that I did not do, so I can't speak about what I don't know. So, how did we even get there? Structures, structures, modeling, things that are at the core, peeling off layers, and understanding, that even if you're heading, let's say you're opening a new business or heading to be successful, or you see that you're on the rise, then how do you accommodate for still being connected with the lower phases of the hierarchy? How do you connect with people? How do you make time? How do you price yourself such that you have the time to dedicate to people who are of low income, and see what they're dealing with, what they are tackling, so you can both have the leverage that you do need to live a good life and to run a good business and to de-stress, and then bring that leverage to the people who need it. But also you are learning from the people who have zero leverage and they make something out of nothing. You're learning how to do that for your own business. You're learning what are their methods, what are their simplifications. You know, for example, if you have people who have no money to pay for medication, but they somehow know how to read and write, or the grandmama knew traditional medicine, or they have witches or magicians in the family. So they deal with that in a completely different way, and that does work. Sometimes more, sometimes less. And if you're not in touch with how do they do it in the lower and the higher aspects of the hierarchy, then it's going to be very difficult to transition to the Aquarian phase. To have done the Capricorn part in your chart with the whole Pluto transition, you would have needed to be exposed to various levels of the hierarchy, both the higher and the lower, both the people that are living in the street, or people that come from different economies and different cultures, and the people who are of the higher society. How do they think? How do they run their day? So to do that well, you really need to kind of integrate the insights that you get from them. Like, how do people, how are the people who are not afraid of the police acting? How are they thinking? How are the people that are afraid of the police acting and thinking? How is the police acting and thinking? And relative to what? So that will allow you to kind of embark at the trial and error of the Aquarian Pluto age, being more informed. And this full moon plays a big part of it, because again, when we have a personal planet conjuncting the outer planets, and here it's Pluto in Capricorn, we have a personal planet conjuncting it, then that personal planet is going to be informed. So it was Venus at first that was informed about the intimacy and the commerce. Okay, for example, human trafficking, sex slavery, all those things. Like, for me, it was the first time that I went to a hostel and I realized that they try to do human trafficking with the people who don't have money to pay. And that can be, that can be your daughter, that can be your teenage son, that, did not compute their expenses correctly the first time, and then they got stuck somewhere and somebody offers them to work in exchange, and it sounds fair, but then they expect them to do something else. And that was like, when Venus was conjuncting Pluto. And then we had, Mars conjuncting Pluto, that was exposed to the strategies that people use. So Mars is a lot about being informed in war tactics. How do they work? And it's a structure. How does the structure work? It's not how do the people work. And we need to pay attention to that, because we've had, let's say, like the Me Too thing, and people were like, okay, let's headhunt, but that's a lot of people. So we need to also not just headhunt, because if you replace the head, it's the question of the agency versus, the structure. If you replace the agency, you may get a good head, but that head is not going to be there for all that long, and it's kind of like dictatorship rather than democracy. So with the pros and cons of democracy, right? So what do we do about structures? Do we want it to still be illegal to have to rely on recommendations when you accept someone to the academia or to a corporate organization? Do we still want to be dependent on apprenticeships? So much so that if the person was abused or harassed, they will not have the ability to continue on in the industry because their abuser is going to block them from the connections, or going to spread rumors about them, or there's a network of human trafficking within, let's say, the film industry, the academia, some places, the army. when army service is widespread in Israel. When we had one exposed, we had a web of people that were they were basically pimping young soldiers, for sex work within the army. We have that in the academia. So that's not just, to headhunt, it's to change the structure. What in our structures allows for that, and how do we change the structure while being informed? And there's going to be an error learning when we get to Aquarius, because that's going to be the first time Pluto is going to do that in like 300 years. So there can be an ideation of anarchy, but we should not forget that we got to the hierarchical order because there was a need in order, there was a need in government, there was a need in to give up certain part of the sovereignty to have more safety in our lives. Just like, you buy a car, then you go to an insurance company and you're like, okay, I'm paying taxes. Basically, I'm paying a tax to the company that in case that somebody steals the car, something happens to the car, I get a new car or I get it fixed. And, if you think about how these insurances companies work, or how the government works in terms of taxes, the structure is very, and I'm not saying it judgmentally, it's very much like a Ponzi scheme. Because what happens in a Ponzi scheme? A lot of people invest money, but the company does not have the ability to return all the people all their money at the same time. Exactly what happens with the banks. But then there was a need to give banks the authority to save and invest and play with money, and that could also be profitable to a certain extent. So how do you not throw the baby with the cradle and say, oh, we're going to be completely anarchical, not going to have any banks, and then if somebody steals your money, you don't have anything, and if you don't have a government that can be considerate or give you a certain sort of outcaring or welfare, if you have like literally nothing, or provide for your shelter, if you don't have a place to stay, if you're not safe, then it's going to be that short, rude life that are very cruel. But then, if you have too much hierarchy, then the same things you were worried about when you agreed to give some of your power away, you're now worried about from the people you gave your power to. And now we're never completely independent, and we can never also completely give our power away. So that transition of the end of the Pluto one is going to be, okay, where have we given too much of our power away in the way that the structure of the organizations currently is? How is the structure of the organization given too much power away? And I believe in any attempt to liberate women's rights, or even in terms of abortion, it's not just a question of abortion, because, in a decade it's going to be a different question. What about, veganism versus people who do eat meat and have their own experience that they tried and it doesn't work for them to not eat meat? What about, a million of other things that we need to consider, and animal rights and whatnot, and environmental things. So how are we going to create a structure that is more democratized, while not completely leaving it to the individual to kind of, you'll get along with nature and, survival of the fittest. Some people are for that. And the moon here conjuncting Pluto is going to be informed on a visceral level. Being full, so it's fully informed, it's fully understanding the phase of where Pluto currently is in Capricorn, and the level that is almost core level. Pluto is in the last degrees of Capricorn now. It's almost core level. And for the United States, it can be very core level. Again, the shooting in Chicago, the ability to apply to the court to be released after you admitted to murder 7 people if you pay some of money. the fact that we have it in 2022, that's a core level. That's beyond, what do we do with guns? It's about human life versus cash. So, which can be the initial, reason that guns were there, because human life matters more than cash. That was why America was founded, by people who escaped taxation and escaped debt from various reasons. Some of them perhaps have been crooks, but some of them perhaps have been just people who tried to make a living, and that was not successful, and they tried to do what they can, but they saw that there are a lot of crooked people in the structure. So they went with the crooked people in the anarchy and founded America. And then the dark side was slavery, of course. The dark side was occupation. And to find a land where human lives, and that's the dissonance in the founding of America, it was founded on the basis that human lives matter more than cash. It's a very not humanitarian, humanistic perspective. The life of a human being matters more than money. That's why we need a new land, and we need to make small governments, and we need to make small taxation, the minimum that we need so that we can live in an orderly life, but not be so bothered by taxation that people lose their lives over debts for just trying to make a life while making a living. That was the American dream, which of course had a lot of error learning, a lot of dark sides. Like, okay, you can have a mansion, but if you have a mansion and you have slaves, so what about these slaves? And then you have the rise of black people into power, and the black president, the rise of women into power. If I'm the owner of my property and my body is my property, then I have a philosophical, legal, religious argument against rape. That's from the feministic perspective. That's the argument against rape. It's also the arguments of people in the sex industry, that they own their body and they will not get dictation for their choices. With the dark side of, if we don't have if we don't have a labor market that allows for wider range of choices for making a life while making a living, can we really talk about anybody, sex industry or not, choosing the workplace? Or is it like some sort of a Hobbesianic choice where you can choose, to move here or there, but that choice is kind of ignoring the physical constraints that are beyond a brick wall. or the psychological constraints around it, even though, Leviathan was written very much informed of the nature of human emotions and attempting to be a mass of liberation, an emphasis on choice where none was given. But it also kind of paved the path to the legitimization of that. So again, any attempts to liberate even yourself without considering the necessary changes needed in the fundamental structure of your life in that Capricorn field will be a miss, but you will not miss it, because if you have been acting to liberate yourself and thinking, oh, I just need to go to, I don't know, my family routines, or even if it is fourth house, so you say, let's say it's family thingy, so like, oh, I really been needing to take a look at how have I been affected by my upbringing. If you're just going to try to do that, not going to work. You're going to have to look at the structure of a family and the power relations, and how can we make more equity within familial structures. That's going to be more like it. Not just for you, but in general. Because let's say if you need to go, let's say you were abused by a family, you need to go to the welfare. The welfare is going to ask you, what about your family? They're going to do everything to bring you back to the family. But if you've been abused there, then that's not the road to go. And that needs to change in the regime. That needs to change in the organization. Again, Capricorn, organization supporting issues of the family. Okay, for example, how come we even have a structure that allows for the debunking of the person's right over their body even if it includes another body within. In a state, in a United States, in a country that was founded on the basis of private property. So this is, and notice that I'm not saying here a moral stand. I'm giving a structural critique. Like how is that gap in the whole? So that gap in the whole can be something that we're just flexible about to accommodate for infants, or for the well-being of infants. But is it really? Are these infants being supported? Those that we do not allow to kill before they are born, are they being supported when they are born? Do we have an accommodating structure for that? Or did we just, outrule one thing and then there is demonstration for the right of the woman? But what about the structure that allowed for that prohibition in a country whose foundations are private property and ownership over the body? How that came to be? And do we want to continue with that? How come a woman is not allowed to have an abortion, but if she kills 7 people, she's allowed to apply for the Court of Justice to pay a sum of money and to be released? Even if it would be rejected, she's still allowed in the state of Chicago to apply for that. But she cannot have an abortion. She can kill 7 people and apply to be released while paying money, which would probably still be rejected, but the fact that she can do that, but she cannot have an abortion. And I don't know if the state of Chicago was one of the states that prohibited abortions, but note that I'm not speaking about a Jupiterian aspect of it. I'm not speaking about whether it's right or wrong to shoot people or to have an abortion. I'm speaking about the structure that allows those personal cases that are societal cases of lack of equity that is not always justified to occur. Why can you apply to be released when you admit to murder 7 people, but you cannot apply to have an abortion if you are not able to go through pregnancy and nourish a child economically, and there is no promise that that child will find a place for caregiving? Like, nothing promises that they will be okay in, let's say, foster home or anything like that. So that lack of equity in the face of the law of human lives. It's like, if you're not born yet, you have a right to live, but the minute you're born, after a couple of years, you could get murdered. 7 of you could get murdered, and the murderer could apply to be released. That's the law. They can be rejected, or probably will be rejected, or maybe not. But that's the law. And that structure is what we're tackling. The insights on what to do are going to be brought about not necessarily through being with the emotion, because it's going to be so overwhelming that it's like, okay, so you have felt what the part of you or the parts of society that go through this immense repression are feeling. Okay, but if you don't take the space from that and laugh about it, joke about it, make a satire, release the energy somehow, then you have to release the gunk of the energy, and then the answers come. It would be a joke that comes up in your mind. It would be a witty sentence. It would be something that somebody throws, a sentence that somebody throws in the air, that becomes a strategy, that becomes a new ideology, that becomes a course of action that will allow us to have another frequency, have another idea, have another vibration as to those coming years of Capricorn, the coming year, until Capricorn releases Pluto for a while, and then Pluto will return to Capricorn, so Pluto will have its first chance to delve into an anarchic territory And I had an IR lecturer that said anarchy is not chaos. Of course, we know that there's a lot of order in chaos. It's a Saturn-Uranus thing. It's not just a Uranus thingy. So there's a lot of order in chaos, a lot of pattern in chaotic systems. They're just dynamic and not so predictable, but it's not that segments of them cannot be closely computed. But he said, coming from politics and governance, he said, well, anarchy is not chaos. If you look at it's just the lack of sovereignty, of an inclusive sovereign, hierarchical sovereignty. So it's not a lack of order, but it can feel like, oh, everything is free, and Pluto in Aquarius can perhaps be very excited, can perhaps say, oh, finally a breath of fresh air. And then he discovers that there are planes over the mountains, and the air is polluted, that environmental things, they actually plan to do a slave colony on Mars, Elon Musk, and that's their space program. That doesn't seem like optimistic, optimistic case. And then it can go back to Capricorn and kind of like, okay, I've delved into this new territory. I've seen what it's like outside of the construct, and here are the things I'd like to alter about the construct itself before I break completely free. So it's a lot like rehabilitation, because it's the child that breaks away from the father. And it's kind of like you having your first navigation in the field, and then you come back and you said, Father, I took with me only one knife, but I was going to the mountains at the desert. So if I would have taken only one knife and I had a good weather, relatively good weather next to a river, so I could fish for a living, I could bathe myself, that would be better. But I only had one knife, and I nearly did not make it alive, because you need water, and you need to protect yourself, from the extreme weather. And it's like, okay, you sent me there with the knife, get along, but with the mountains, it's like, that's not. And, a good father, a good Saturnian figure, you say, this is a good thing, and I did it on purpose, because if I would not have let you out to do that, you would probably fight to stay out, and then you would take only that knife with you and go to these deserts, not knowing that the video you've seen on YouTube of a person that fishes to make his way only with the knife and to survive in nature is not going to apply to you. Because it's different ground. Again, yes, Capricorn, ground. So Capricorn is very aware of why the hierarchy was formed initially, to accommodate for living on the ground. And then as you lift off, there are certain things that don't apply, but then you need to learn how to lift off. You need to understand air pressure. You need to understand all kind of things you were not considering. And that's why Capricorn is the mountains. It's almost the air. You know that air is thinner when you're higher. So maybe you've built a wonderful engine that could do for a Rolls Royce on land, but then you try to put it on a jet plane, or to build an aircraft, and then you can't lift it, because the air above is thinner and there's less air pressure. And then you have to, you can do the lift off, but you cannot remain on air, because you would need to keep up at a certain speed that's faster when the air is thinner, to create the viscosity. It's not velocity, friction, that keeps you aligned on air. But right now we're not dealing with that yet. Right now we're just dealing with understanding why do I even want to fly? What's wrong with, perhaps there's too much traffic. Perhaps there is not a way to make a living. Perhaps I've been, I believe that I will find my freedom and empowerment when I'm, on air. So you would have to look at both those internal motives of why do you want to change the structure, what do you feel oppressed by, because you otherwise can tend to look for something in the air that you had better found on land, because the job is to take something with you from the land and then fly together. But eventually, right now we're not talking about the liftoff yet. We are talking about, why am I waiting for Pluto to go to Aquarius? Why am I thinking that it's going to be there in Aquarius? If I'm standing on the mountain or almost at the top, I know that I'm almost at the top. Probably I'm going to make it. Either I'm not going to make it, I'm going to go to the great beyond, but probably I'm going to make it till January 2023, hopefully. And then, you're going to reach the top of the mountain in your life, in the Capricorn field. And then it's up to you to make sure that the youngsters are both going to know about the things that cannot change. For example, this year was when I escaped an unhealthy relationship. This year, I did not have a teaching, because it was like, okay, I knew how to recognize certain aspects of violence and get away faster, but there was a more practical core level of, okay, what if you have to leave the house and the housing prices go up? So you got to get along in the street. How do you do that? Okay, how do you do that? Are you supposed to do that? How am I going to make it how are we going to make it so that the youngsters that have to climb this mountain next time won't have it as hard as we had it, but also prepare them to the fact that it's not going to be, you just make a decision and the whole universe aligns to help you and you're going to make it. This is true in many cases, but there are also a lot of pitfalls where you could potentially be at life risk, and you definitely want to know about it, and you definitely want to plan for it as much as you can. It's not always possible, because sometimes that's very sudden, but you definitely want to plan for things to be different. Okay, so for example, I definitely want to plan for jobs that will not necessitate having a recommendation from your boss. I definitely want the housing market to be different and to have various options of housing that are available for people who just need to survive, on land. And then there are the internal psychological things. Definitely want certain types of managing your emotions, managing your anxiety, using your body, especially the bone structure. So body weight can be very, very good when it's a Capricorn thingy. But I can say that, I'm standing here at a certain pinnacle. Hopefully, I'll make it to, to Pluto in Aquarius. And I'm saying, okay, since 2008, what I've gone through in my Capricorn house, my dreams, my goals, my colleagues, my status to some extent, my travels, my academic, because I have Saturn in the 9th, I can say that there are, I may have even lost some people along the way that went to the great beyond. And I can definitely say that there are a lot of things that need to change in the structure so that the youngsters will not have it as terrible as I did. And that's still in work. That's something that's going to be, that's have to be reiterated. That, I have a role of speaking about these things, of speaking about the structural things. Again, with my third house being activated this year with Venus, so you're gonna have to think about, how are you contributing to the greater society with your voice, with your story, with your strategies, with your talents, to make a difference in the structure, to create the third options in the places where there are only ultimatums, one way or the other. And when you get to deeply consider that, the answer is going to come from letting loose, taking the space. So it's not just being with the emotion, because when the moon is out of bounds and the Mercury is out of bounds and they oppose each other, and the Mercury is in Cancer, it's not his happiest place, and the moon is in Capricorn, it's where his fallen place. Don't expect to have that stoic meditation to give you the answers. Go to the Uranus house. Go to Uranus in Taurus. Go to the rebellion side of you. Not with, I'm not saying explode things physically, but make a satire, make a joke, do a rap battle, do those Venusian explosive stuff that are beyond the self-care. Prepare something of an artwork, of a lecture, of a cultural form to the society, and that's going to bring you a thing that someone says, a way that someone reacts to you, a thing that you say to yourself, or a joke that you have with yourself, is going to suddenly become a viable strategy. Or you could have a joke, somebody saying something, like when I was in the airport and somebody said, talked about Sedona, and somebody said, do it by feet if you have to. And then I saw the theme of feet and shoes around my trip, and I was like, oh, do it by feet. Like, that can actually be a liner, that can actually be a marketing line for one of my products. That can actually, be a campaign. That's the do it by feet. And with me having an ascendant in Pisces, ruling the feet, and Jupiter in Capricorn again, and feet is also double meaning for the feet also on air. When you learn how to fly, so you talk about feet. And we head into Pluto in an air sign. Okay, so that's another display on feet. So it could be something like that. It's something that is very deep, and you're not alone in this. You are not alone. This is what I want to say. You are not alone. Whatever you are going through or have been through, you are not alone, and you might not know the extent of how many people are going through the same thing. Because it's one thing to hear a rumor, to see something in the news. It's a completely different thing to experience that. It's a completely different thing just to have a hands-on experience on what was it like to be evacuated? What was it like to run away from, to the street from a violent relationship? What was it like to not being able to keep a job even though some of the department was in your favor when you were harassed by someone? Or what does it even feel like to be harassed by subordinates? And you kind of begin to think about all your ex-bosses and realize that, oh, that was not the first time that it happened. And I didn't even think that was sexual harassment, and so and so. So you got the hands-on experience in your Capricorn house with a lot of trials and tribulations. But with Pluto there, it was not just you. And Capricorn ruling Saturn can make you feel confined and isolated. And Pluto intensifies the trauma, so you could feel that you're the only one going through this. That you're going through a lot alone. So you're not the only one. And even when you do act, when you do write, it can be solitary action. It's not necessarily going to be a lot of people gathering together, because Saturn is a loner. You need to see where's Saturn in your chart. Or even if there are gatherings of people, I have a good friend that dealt with something in the academia similar to what I was exposed to. They're dealing with that alone. They cannot even talk about their case, and they're going through so much that they cannot even answer the phone. They cannot even answer the phone. So even a lot of people want to be there for them. They are going through so much that they need to rest. Saturn's rest, letting go, rest, taking a lot of rest, because it's a marathon. It's not a short distance, and that can feel like you're doing it all by yourself. You're dealing with it all by yourself. You can't. You have even the leverage to receive support that you need, but you need to know, even cognitively, that it's a Pluto thing. If it's anything Capricorn related, check where Capricorn is in your house and where is Saturn. It's not a personal, the personal is the political with that aspect. And with Capricorn, it's a fundamental structure that you need to look at. A fundamental structure. It's not just the self. But even when you look at the self, it's not about a simple decision. It's about a certain way that my life is currently structured in that phase that needs to go through radical transformation that is slow with Pluto, but we are reaching the culmination of it, and you're going to have a very deep insight. It's not going to be, a lovely, it's not a bed of roses. But there's something that you're going to have to take into consideration and to fully address. So what I advise you to do today, take your time to rest, self-pleasure, unless you're, dealing with violations of your boundaries astrally. So, self-pleasure, self-care, tend to you, work with plants, nourish your plants, do things that for sure are going to make you feel a lot easier. Take a day off if you can, because the Capricorn full moon is, although transient, it's just a couple of hours, but there are going to be some serious couple of hours, because the moon is the way we psychologically experience things, in the sense of, the heart and mind. Even the history of our emotion. So the history of our emotions related to, I'm just saying that, and I'm like running away. You can even see me look into the mountains, look into the air, to the open space. And, I think there was a part where you even saw my brow. I was so looking to lift myself up. But that's how you're going to feel with that, because it's something that you need to tackle, and you do need to take the space. Don't expect to be in a deep, I want to say penetrative meditation. Deep penetrative meditation with Pluto there, yeah? Don't expect that meditating on this is going to somehow work with Mercury out of bounds in Cancer and the Moon out of bounds in Capricorn. Do something, dance, sing, laugh, write, joke about it. You need that little bit of disconnect, to have something that you say lightly as a joke, and that's something that you lightly as a joke say is going to be the grounded solution to the way it's going to be. So that's what I had to say. And I mean, even when I was looking at the shape of that triangle, it was like this. The planets were like this opposition of the full moon, with Pluto and Mercury opposing each other. And then I was like, oh, what are the blue ones to mitigate that? And you're like, Uranus. And I'm like, haha, really? It is. It's like the joke about the person that ran and walked, got tired and began to run. And I was actually doing that when I was in academia. I would, sit 4 hours tired, kind of grab myself, go to the gym, which was available for us students, and then I'd begin to do a little running, and that was my joke, that was actually real. So that Uranus is kind of like, oh, what do we have? What do we have for for a sense of ease? It's like you go into a pub and you're having a wine and a beer and another wine and a beer, and you're like, do you have like a fresh drink? And they're like, yes, of course. The whiskey on the rocks is on You know, that's that's the Uranus mitigation of it. But surprisingly enough, it works. Surprisingly enough, that spark of the moment, that extra boost of energy to that already energetic thingy, has a surprising insight that can lead to a change. And don't forget, Uranus is going to join with Rahu and Mars around August 1st. So that can be another phase of that. Like whatever came into Uranus right now is going to be manifested. And again, if you're on the Taurus side, if you're on the personal planet side, you need to also pay attention where you are the Pluto being, where you have the authority. On whom do you have now the authority? What are you doing with that? That's something you better take a close look at. And then the second thing is, okay, who are you subordinate to in the structure, in the state, whatnot? And know that there's going to be a certain act of revolt that's going to change the phase of that structure. It's going to change the phase of that structure. Again, the Saturn Pluto is, I think, a 10-degree orbit. It's not an actual trine. It's trined by houses. It's not trined by aspects. But you always look to the trines and the sextiles when you have an oppositions. If you have oppositions to it, and it's like, okay, what do we have? What can we lean on to have a bit of a relief? And like Uranus, you know, a raging bullet of energy and unconventionality and unpredictability. But surprisingly enough, it's going to work for you. So that was quite a long video. I'm not going to do a sign by sign. It's going to take 2 hours, and but you can write down in the comments below where's your Capricorn house and where's your Saturn, and I'm going to come up with a one-liner for you of what you're dealing with. You can go to astro.com, count the houses from your ascendant if you want to go through whole sign system, which I don't usually support. Economicity as a standard for what is for predictive paradigms, but I did find whole sign houses to be predictive, and it's very economic, so I tend to use it a lot because of the economicity of how simple it is relative to other houses assignments. Plus, I do like the story that it tells, and it seems to work for me. So I'm Shirley Tali Shir on Twitter. I'm Shirley Youngblood on Instagram. You can DM me for readings. I receive Ethereum and Bitcoin at this stage. I can receive other coins, I believe, to my IBAN. You're gonna have to contact me for that. That's $50 for a reading, which I think is quite approachable. But if you're in a situation where you can't afford it, you can register for the waiting list for fully subsidized readings. When I get kind of the leverage to have a couple of readings that I do paid, then I also allocate, a spot for people who can't afford any insight. And my approach is Jupiterian. It's trying to see where is the light in the current situation that you can hone in on to give you either a relief or a sense of optimism or a sense of meaning, and kind of hone in on that. What can you do? Well, it's like a Jupiter reading. But not only a Jupiter reading, what are the harmonious aspects that you have around this? Because I do not only inform you of what you already probably know, if you have hard transits, but the thing is that the hard aspects are very manifesting. For example, in Uranian astrology, you only look at hard aspects. You only look at hard aspects. 90 degrees, the quincunx, the ones that go, by 4, because the divide by 4, but you don't go look at the harmonious aspect, because the harmonious aspects are not going to manifest in themselves in the way that you sense them, but you're going to have to activate a sort of consciousness, and Jupiter rules that. Jupiter rules the act of doing good, the good instinct, the instinct to do good and to see light and to be kind and to nourish. Okay, the temperatures for Jupiter are very nourishing. So it's going to be a lot about how can you ignite your trines and sextiles, how can you ignite your more benefic aspects consciously, and what practices are going to help you to do that, to mitigate, to alleviate, and to lean on in order to solve or bring into a happier resolution, a safer, a more a whole resolution of whatever hard aspects and hard transits you're experiencing right now, which is probably quite a lot because the skies are the way they are. But even though there's always something you can look into in that day that can go right. In most cases. So that's where I focus on my readings. It's a very Jupiterian approach. It's, I've ascended in Pisces, my Jupiter is in Capricorn. So it's about looking into the practical ways in which you can make something that is doom and gloom a bit lighter, a bit happier, finding your sense of optimism and joy, even within those chaotic situations. So yeah, that's sort of my orientation. If that's something that you feel like you need in your life, you can book a reading with me, subscribe and like, and again, tell me where your Capricorn house is, what house it is, and where is Saturn in your chart, so I can give you a one-liner right here in the comments below of what you can expect to tackle, and perhaps some optimistic message around that. Have a beautiful day.